The lonely wail of a coyote carried across the vast Arkansas prairie. As Fiona Gentry stepped off the dusty stagecoach, her heart pounding with uncertainty. Fort Smith, Arkansas, 1878, a place she'd never been, filled with people she'd never met. And now she was expected to step into a dead woman's shoes. The sun beat down mercilessly as Fiona clutched her single carpetbag, containing everything she owned in the world. At 26, she had traveled over 700 miles from Pennsylvania after responding to an advertisement in the newspaper. Housekeeper needed for widower with 4 children on cattle ranch outside Fort Smith. Room, board, and modest salary provided. It had seemed like Providence when she'd read those words, having just lost her position at the textile factory and with nowhere else to turn. Miss Gentry. A deep voice startled her from her thoughts. She turned to see a tall man with broad shoulders and a weather-beaten face. Dark circles underlined his eyes, and his expression was grim beneath the brim of his Stetson. This had to be Isaac Sutton, the rancher who'd sent for her. "Mr. Sutton, I presume?" Fiona extended her hand, trying to appear more confident than she felt. His large, calloused hand engulfed hers in a brief, firm shake. "That's right. Hope your journey wasn't too trying." "It was." "Educational," she replied diplomatically, not mentioning the uncomfortable seats, the dust that seemed to penetrate everything, or the drunk who tried to make advances in Missouri. Isaac Sutton nodded curtly, taking her bag. "Wagons this way. Children are back at the ranch." As they walked through the bustling streets of Fort Smith, Fiona studied him surreptitiously. He couldn't be much older than 32, but grief had carved deep lines around his mouth. His dark hair had hints of premature gray at the temples, and beneath his controlled demeanor, she sensed a barely contained storm of emotion. "Your letter mentioned 4 children," Fiona ventured as he helped her onto the wagon seat. "Yes. Elizabeth is 10, William 8, Sarah 6, and little Thomas just turned 4. His voice softened slightly when he spoke their names, but then hardened again. "They've been without proper looking after since Martha passed 8 months ago. Consumption took her." "I'm very sorry for your loss, Mr. Sutton." He flicked the reins and the horses lurched forward. "Best you understand from the beginning, Miss Gentry. I'm hiring you to cook, clean, and look after my children. Nothing more." "Of course," she said, stiffening at his tone. "I would never presume otherwise." The remainder of the journey passed in silence, as the wagon rumbled through increasingly sparse settlements, then out onto the open range. After nearly 2 hours, they crested a hill, and Fiona caught her first glimpse of the Sutton Ranch spread out across a rolling valley below. The main house was substantial, 2 stories of weathered wood with a wide porch wrapping around the front. A barn stood nearby, along with several outbuildings. In the distance, cattle dotted the grasslands like scattered chessmen. "It's lovely," Fiona murmured sincerely. Isaac Sutton made a noncommittal sound. "It's home." As they approached the house, 4 small figures emerged onto the porch. The children stood in a solemn line, from tallest to shortest, watching the wagon approach. Behind them hovered an elderly woman, who Fiona later learned was Mrs. Abigail Jenkins, a neighbor who'd been looking after the children temporarily. The wagon rolled to a stop, and Isaac jumped down, coming around to help Fiona descend. "Children, this is Miss Gentry. She'll be your new housekeeper." Fiona smoothed her travel-wrinkled skirt and smiled warmly at the 4 pairs of eyes studying her with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. "Hello," she said gently. "I'm very pleased to meet you all." Elizabeth, the eldest, gave a perfect curtsy that spoke of careful upbringing. "Welcome, Miss Gentry." Her brown eyes, so like her father's, held a wariness that broke Fiona's heart. Too young to be so guarded, she thought. William merely nodded, his chin jutting out in a way that suggested he was trying very hard to be the man of the house in his father's frequent absences. Little Sarah whispered a shy greeting, half hiding behind her older brother, while Thomas simply stared with enormous blue eyes, thumb firmly planted in his mouth. "Mrs. Jenkins will show you to your room and explain your duties," Isaac said brusquely. "I've got to see to the south pasture." With that, he turned and strode toward the barn, not looking back. "Don't mind him, dear," Mrs. Jenkins said quietly, approaching with a sympathetic smile that crinkled her weathered face. "He hasn't been the same since Martha died." "I understand," Fiona replied, though she wondered what kind of man he had been before grief transformed him. Mrs. Jenkins ushered her inside, the children trailing behind like ducklings. The house was clean but bore the unmistakable feeling of a place where something vital was missing. Martha Sutton's absence seemed to echo in every corner. "This will be your room," Mrs. Jenkins said, opening a door off the kitchen. The space was small but pleasant, with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a rocking chair near the window that overlooked the vegetable garden. "It's perfect, thank you." "Supper's at 6 sharp. Isaac likes punctuality." The older woman hesitated. "These children need more than just someone to feed and clean up after them, Miss Gentry. They need a woman's gentle touch." "I'll do my best," Fiona promised, though she wondered if Isaac Sutton would allow her to provide the nurturing his children so clearly needed. After Mrs. Jenkins departed, Fiona quickly unpacked her few belongings and splashed water on her face from the basin. She changed into a fresh cotton dress and pinned her thick auburn hair back into a neat bun before venturing out to the kitchen. Elizabeth was there, stirring something on the stove. The girl looked up, startled. "I'm just making Papa's coffee for when he comes in," she explained hastily. "I always make it. Mama taught me exactly how he likes it." "That's very thoughtful of you," Fiona said, noting how the child balanced on a small stool to reach the stove properly. "Would you mind showing me where everything is in the kitchen? I'd like to prepare dinner." Elizabeth nodded solemnly, clearly relieved that Fiona wasn't going to usurp this small duty she performed for her father. Over the next hour, Fiona learned the layout of the kitchen as Elizabeth appointed herself guide. The other children gradually drifted in, curiosity overcoming their initial reserve. "Can you bake cookies?" Thomas asked suddenly, his first words to her. "I make excellent molasses cookies," Fiona replied, smiling at the little boy. "Mama made molasses cookies every Sunday," Sarah said softly. A painful silence fell. Fiona knelt down to the children's level. "I'll never replace your mother," she said gently but firmly. "I would never try to, but I would like to be your friend if you'll let me." William looked dubious, but Elizabeth surprised Fiona by nodding. "We need help," the girl admitted with painful adult practicality. "Papa works from sunrise until after dark." "Then I'm glad to be here to help," Fiona said simply. By the time Isaac returned for supper, Fiona had managed to prepare a respectable meal of beef stew, cornbread, and stewed apples with the supplies she'd found. The table was set neatly, and all 4 children were clean-faced and seated. Isaac entered, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. He seemed momentarily taken aback by the domestic scene before him. "Supper's ready, Mr. Sutton," Fiona said. He nodded curtly and took his place at the head of the table. An awkward silence fell as he bowed his head. "Lord, bless this food to our use and us to thy service," he said briefly. "Amen." The meal proceeded quietly at first, with only the sounds of cutlery against plates. Fiona tried several conversational openings, but Isaac responded with minimal words. The children, taking their cue from their father, remained similarly subdued. Finally, Fiona addressed the children directly. "I thought perhaps tomorrow I might see the garden. I notice it needs some attention." "Mama loved her garden," Sarah volunteered. Isaac's fork clattered against his plate. "The garden hasn't been tended properly since." He stopped abruptly. "I'd be happy to restore it," Fiona said gently, "with the children's help if they'd like." Isaac's dark eyes met hers across the table. "Do as you see fit with the household matters, Miss Gentry." "That's what you're being paid for." He pushed back from the table. "Thank you for the meal. I have accounts to review." After he left, Elizabeth sighed. "Papa doesn't like to talk about Mama." "Grief affects people differently," Fiona replied, beginning to clear the dishes. "Sometimes it's very hard to speak of those we've lost." That night, lying in her narrow bed, Fiona wondered if she had made a terrible mistake in coming to this place. Isaac Sutton clearly wanted nothing more than a functional housekeeper, yet his children needed so much more. And what did she need? A safe harbor after fleeing a difficult past in Pennsylvania, yes, but also connection, purpose. Whether she could find those things here remained to be seen. The next few weeks established a routine. Fiona rose before dawn to prepare breakfast. Isaac would eat quickly, rarely speaking, then disappear to work the ranch until supper. The children gradually warmed to her, especially after she began reading to them each evening and teaching Elizabeth and Sarah to sew. The garden became Fiona's special project. With the children's help, she cleared weeds, turned soil, and planted vegetables and flowers. Thomas proved particularly enthusiastic, delighting in digging in the dirt with his small hands. "Mama used to sing while she gardened," he told Fiona one morning as they worked side by side. "Would you like me to sing?" Fiona asked gently. He nodded, and so she began a soft lullaby her own mother had sung to her. Soon Sarah joined them, then Elizabeth. Only William kept his distance, watching from the porch with a guarded expression. Later that day, as Fiona hung laundry on the line, she became aware of Isaac watching her from near the barn. When she turned to acknowledge him, he quickly looked away and strode off toward the pastures. That evening, after the children were asleep, Fiona sat on the porch, enjoying the cooler night air. The vastness of the prairie sky above her, scattered with more stars than she'd ever seen in the city, made her feel small yet somehow connected to something greater. The creak of the door startled her. Isaac emerged, pausing when he saw her. "I'm sorry," Fiona said, rising. "I'll leave you in peace." "No need." His voice was gruff. "It's your porch too while you're here." He settled into one of the chairs, and after a moment's hesitation, Fiona resumed her seat. "The children seem to be taking to you," he said after a long silence. "They're wonderful children, Mr. Sutton. You and your wife raised them well." He flinched slightly at the mention of Martha, but didn't rise to leave as Fiona had expected. "Martha had a way with them I never did," he said quietly. "She knew how to soothe hurts and calm fears. I only know how to work cattle and fix fence lines." "Children need different things from their parents," Fiona offered. "Your strength and provision matter greatly to them." Isaac shook his head. "Not enough. I see how they light up when you read to them in the evenings. Martha used to do that. Would you like to join us tomorrow?" Fiona suggested impulsively. The children would love it. To her surprise, he nodded slowly. "Perhaps I will." True to his word, the following evening Isaac joined them in the sitting room as Fiona read from a book of fairy tales. The children were visibly stunned by their father's presence, but soon Thomas climbed into Isaac's lap, and Sarah leaned against his knee. Fiona caught Isaac's eye over the top of the book, and saw something there, a flicker of the man he might have been before grief hardened him. It made her heart skip a beat, a reaction she immediately chastised herself for. She was here to care for his children, nothing more. The next morning at breakfast, William knocked over his milk, Before Fiona could react, Isaac's hand slammed down on the table. "Be more careful, boy." William's face crumpled and he fled from the table. "Mr. Sutton," Fiona said, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "It was an accident." "He's too old for such carelessness," Isaac snapped. "He's 8, Fiona countered, surprising herself with her boldness. "And he's trying so hard to be perfect for you that he makes himself nervous." Isaac stared at her, clearly unaccustomed to being challenged. The other children watched with wide eyes. "You overstep, Miss Gentry," he said coldly. "Perhaps," she acknowledged, rising to fetch a cloth for the spill. "But someone needs to speak for these children." Isaac pushed back from the table and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. "Is Papa going to send you away?" Sarah asked tremulously. "I don't think so," Fiona assured her, though she wasn't entirely certain. "Now, let's clean this up and then I'll help you with your reading." Later that morning, Fiona found William in the barn, angrily pitching hay with a fork too large for him. "Your father loves you very much," she said without preamble. William scowled. "He's always angry at me." "He's angry at the world for taking your mother," Fiona corrected gently. "But he's directing that anger in the wrong places sometimes." The boy's shoulders slumped. "I try to be good." "I know you do." Fiona hesitated, then asked, "Would you help me with something?" "I'm trying to fix that broken step on the porch, but I can't seem to get the nails straight." It was a small deception. She was perfectly capable of handling the repair, but the way William's face brightened at being needed was worth it. They worked together on the step, and when Isaac returned for the midday meal, he found them hammering the final nails. He dismounted slowly, watching them with an unreadable expression. "We fixed the step, Papa," William said, a hint of pride in his voice. "Miss Gentry showed me how to hold the hammer right." Isaac's eyes met Fiona's over his son's head. Something passed between them, acknowledgement, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. "Good work, son," Isaac said, his voice softer than Fiona had yet heard it. He ruffled William's hair before heading inside, leaving both William and Fiona staring after him in surprise. That evening after supper, Isaac lingered at the table instead of retreating to his study. "Miss Gentry," he said as she cleared the plates, "I believe I owe you an apology for my behavior this morning." Fiona nearly dropped the plates in shock. "That's not necessary, Mr. Sutton." "It is," he insisted. "You were right. William is just a boy and I've been expecting him to be a man." Fiona nodded, setting the dishes down. "He admires you greatly, you know. All your children do." "I haven't given them much reason to lately," he admitted, rubbing a hand across his face. "I've been so caught up in my own grief that I've neglected theirs." "It's not too late to change that," Fiona said softly. Isaac's eyes held hers for a long moment. "No," he agreed. "Perhaps it isn't." The following Sunday, Fiona was surprised when Isaac announced at breakfast that they would all be attending church. "We haven't been since before Mama went to heaven," Elizabeth whispered to Fiona as they prepared to leave. The small church in town was filled with familiar faces from Fiona's trips to the general store. Curious glances followed them as they took a pew near the back, the first public appearance of the entire Sutton family since Martha's death. After the service, Isaac was drawn into conversation with other ranchers, while Fiona found herself approached by several women eager to make her acquaintance. "We've been praying for Isaac and those dear children," confided Mrs. Peterson, the minister's wife. "It's good to see you bringing some order back to their lives." "I'm just their housekeeper," Fiona demurred. Mrs. Peterson's knowing smile suggested she thought otherwise, an assumption that made Fiona decidedly uncomfortable. On the wagon ride home, Isaac seemed more relaxed than Fiona had yet seen him. "The sermon was good today," he remarked, "about healing and new beginnings." Yes, Fiona agreed, watching the children dozing in the back of the wagon. It was timely. Isaac glanced at her. The townspeople seem to approve of you. They're concerned for your family, she replied carefully. They've been waiting for me to emerge from my grief, he said bluntly. Or to remarry. Fiona's cheeks heated. I imagine gossip travels quickly in a small community. Like wildfire, he confirmed with a wry twist of his lips that might almost have been a smile. As summer progressed into early fall, subtle changes occurred at the Sutton ranch. Isaac began spending more evenings with his family instead of working until exhaustion claimed him. He taught William to ride properly and took Elizabeth along occasionally when checking the herd. He even spent one memorable afternoon teaching all the children to fish in the creek that ran through the property, with Fiona preparing a picnic for them. Watching from the blanket as Isaac patiently showed Thomas how to bait a hook, Fiona felt a dangerous warmth spreading through her chest. This man, emerging slowly from his grief, was becoming someone she could care for deeply, perhaps already did. Suddenly, Sarah shrieked with delight as she pulled a small fish from the water. Isaac's laugh, a sound Fiona had never heard before, rang out across the creek. He looked over at Fiona, his eyes crinkling at the corners and her breath caught. "Come try," he called to her, holding out a spare fishing pole. "I've never fished before," she admitted, rising to join them at the water's edge. "Never," William was incredulous. "I grew up in the city," Fiona explained. "Not many fishing opportunities there." "Stand here," Isaac instructed, positioning her near a calm pool. "Hold the pole like this." His hands covered hers to demonstrate the proper grip, and Fiona was acutely aware of his closeness, the scent of leather and sunshine that clung to him. "Now, cast it out toward that ripple," he guided, his voice low near her ear. Fiona tried to focus on the fishing lesson rather than the warmth of his body behind hers. She flicked the pole as instructed, and to her surprise, the line arced gracefully over the water. "Well done," Isaac praised, stepping back. The children cheered, and Fiona felt a flush of pleasure at their approval and at Isaac's. That evening, as they drove the wagon home with a string of small fish that would supplement their supper, Fiona found herself singing softly. Elizabeth joined in, then Sarah, until even Isaac was humming along. It felt for the first time like they might be becoming a family. The thought both elated and terrified Fiona. 2 days later, everything changed. Fiona was teaching the girls to make bread when a rider approached at a gallop. From the window, she saw Isaac hurry to meet the man, their conversation brief but intense. Isaac nodded grimly, then ran toward the house. "Miss Gentry," he called as he burst through the door. "There's a fire spreading from the Jenkins property. It could reach us by nightfall if the wind shifts." Fear clutched at Fiona's heart. "What can I do?" "Get the children ready to evacuate if necessary. Pack only essentials." His voice was calm but urgent. "I'm riding out with the men to try to create a firebreak." Elizabeth's face had gone pale. Papa Isaac knelt before his eldest daughter. "I'm counting on you to help Miss Gentry with your brothers and sister." "Can you do that?" The girl nodded solemnly, straightening her shoulders. Isaac hesitated, then pulled all 4 children into a swift, fierce embrace. "I'll be back as soon as I can." As he rose, his eyes met Fiona's over the children's heads. "Take care of them," he said softly. "With my life," she promised. For hours after Isaac left, Fiona kept the children busy packing small bundles of clothing and gathering water buckets in case embers reached the house. By late afternoon, the western sky had darkened with smoke, and the air grew acrid. "Will Papa be all right?" Sarah asked fearfully as they stood on the porch, watching the distant haze. "Your father is very capable," Fiona assured her, praying she spoke truth. "And he has many men helping him." As dusk approached, Fiona made a decision. We need to be ready to leave if necessary. Elizabeth, help Sarah gather any special treasures they can carry. William, check that the wagon is ready. I'll prepare Thomas. The children scattered to their tasks with remarkable composure. Fiona was bundling Thomas into a warm jacket when a thunderous sound made her pause. "Riders coming!" William shouted from outside. Fiona rushed to the door, Thomas in her arms. A group of men on horseback was approaching fast, Isaac in the lead. His face and clothes were blackened with soot, but he was upright and moving. Relief nearly buckled Fiona's knees. "Thank God," she whispered. Isaac dismounted wearily. "The fire's contained," he announced. "Jenkins' barn is lost, and some pasture eland, but we managed to stop it before it reached any houses." The other children ran to their father, surrounding him with excited questions and expressions of relief. He answered them patiently, though Fiona could see exhaustion in every line of his body. "You should rest," she told him when the men had departed. "I'll heat water for you to wash, and supper will be ready shortly." Isaac nodded gratefully, too tired to argue. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Fiona brought a cup of coffee to Isaac where he sat on the porch. The night was cool but clear, the earlier smoke dissipated by a merciful change in the wind. "Thank you," he said, accepting the cup, "for everything today." "I'm just glad you're safe," Fiona replied, settling into the chair beside him. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the cricket song surrounding them. "When I saw that fire coming toward our land," Isaac said finally, "all I could think about was getting back here to the children." He paused. "And to you." Fiona's heart leapt, but she kept her voice steady. "The children were very brave. They take after their father." "Their mother, too," Isaac said softly. "Martha had courage I never did." It was the first time he had spoken of his wife without obvious pain. Progress, Fiona thought. "Will you tell me about her?" she asked carefully. To her surprise, Isaac smiled slightly. "She was stubborn as a mule, had opinions on everything, loved fiercely." He looked out into the darkness. "She would have approved of you, I think." "That means a great deal to me," Fiona said sincerely. "When she was dying," Isaac continued, his voice dropping, "she made me promise to find someone else eventually. 'Don't let the children grow up without a mother's love,' she said. I told her I could never love anyone else." Fiona's throat tightened. "And now?" Isaac turned to her, his expression unguarded for the first time since she'd known him. "Now I think Martha understood something I didn't, that the heart has room for new love without diminishing what came before." The words hung in the air between them, full of possibility. Fiona hardly dared breathe. "I've come to care for you, Fiona," Isaac said, using her given name for the first time. "More than I believed possible, but I won't press you. Your position here is secure regardless." "Isaac," she said softly, "I care for you too. And I've come to love your children as if they were my own." He reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand in his. "I can offer you a hard life on a ranch that's still struggling. 4 children who need more than I know how to give them. And a man who's still learning how to live again." "It sounds perfect to me," Fiona whispered. The following weeks were a time of cautious courtship. Isaac began bringing Fiona small gifts, wildflowers from the range, a hair ribbon from town, a carved wooden bird that he'd made himself during the long evenings. They took walks together after the children were asleep, talking about their pasts, their hopes, their dreams for the future. Fiona told him about her childhood in Pennsylvania, her father's death in a mill accident, her mother's struggle to support them, until consumption claimed her as well. She spoke of her brief engagement to a man who had proven false, leaving her heartbroken and nearly destitute before she saw Isaac's advertisement. "His loss is my gain," Isaac said simply, taking her hand. The children observed the developing relationship with varying reactions. Elizabeth seemed relieved, as if a weight had been lifted from her young shoulders. William was cautiously approving, especially after Isaac began including him more in the ranch work. Sarah was delighted, while Thomas, too young to fully understand, simply accepted the growing affection between the adults in his life. One crisp October morning, Isaac asked Fiona to accompany him to town on errands. "The children can manage at home for a few hours," he assured her. "Elizabeth is quite capable." In town, after visiting the general store, Isaac surprised Fiona by steering her toward the small church. "I've spoken with Reverend Peterson," he explained. "He's expecting us." Fiona's heart fluttered with anticipation. "Isaac." He stopped on the church steps, taking both her hands in his. "Fiona Gentry, you came to us as a stranger and became the heart of our home. Will you do me the very great honor of becoming my wife and a mother to my children?" Tears sprang to Fiona's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "With all my heart, yes." The Reverend Peterson married them that very day, with only his wife and the shopkeeper as witnesses. The simple ceremony was perfect in its sincerity, two people pledging to build a life together out of the ashes of their separate pasts. On the ride home, Fiona's wedding ring, a simple gold band that had been Isaac's mother's, caught the sunlight. "How shall we tell the children?" she asked. Isaac smiled, a genuine, full smile that transformed his face. "I have a feeling they've been expecting this." He was right. When they arrived home and announced their marriage, Elizabeth hugged Fiona fiercely, whispering, "I knew you were meant to be our mother." William grinned and offered a formal handshake to his father, then surprised Fiona with a quick, shy embrace. Sarah danced around the room in excitement, while Thomas simply asked if he could call Fiona Mama now. "If you'd like to," Fiona said, her voice thick with emotion. "I think Mama sent you to us," Elizabeth said later that night as Fiona tucked her into bed. "She promised she'd make sure we were taken care of." Fiona's eyes filled with tears. "Then I'm doubly blessed to have been chosen by both your mother and father." That night, as Fiona and Isaac lay together in what was now their shared bedroom, she marveled at the twist of fate that had brought her to this place, this family. "I never imagined I could be this happy again," Isaac murmured, his arms around her. "Nor I," Fiona agreed, resting her head on his chest. "It feels almost too perfect." "Not perfect," he corrected. "Real, with all the struggles and joys that entails." She smiled in the darkness. "Real is better than perfect." The first year of their marriage brought both joys and challenges. The ranch prospered under Isaac's renewed energy and focus. The children flourished with the stability of two parents who loved them. Fiona transformed the house into a true home, filling it with music, laughter, and the scent of fresh baked bread. There were difficult moments, of course. Times when grief resurfaced unexpectedly, a dress of Martha's found in a trunk, a childhood illness that frightened them all, reminding them of what they had lost. But increasingly, these moments were balanced by new memories being built, a new family forged from separate broken pieces. In the spring, Fiona discovered she was expecting a child. When she shared the news with Isaac, his face reflected such wonder and joy that she knew, without doubt, that their love was strong enough to embrace both past and future. "I hope it's another girl," Elizabeth declared when they told the children. "We have enough boys." "I want a brother," William countered immediately. Isaac laughed, pulling Fiona close to his side. "Whatever God sends us will be perfect." As Fiona's pregnancy progressed, the entire family became involved in preparations. Isaac built a cradle, lovingly sanding the wood until it was smooth as silk. The girls helped sew tiny garments while William painted the nursery. On a crisp December morning, with snow dusting the prairie, Fiona gave birth to twin boys. The midwife declared it a miracle that both mother and babies were healthy, given the unexpected double delivery. James and Joseph, Fiona and Isaac decided, naming the boys after their respective fathers. "They're so small," Thomas marveled, peering at his new brothers. "You were even smaller when you were born," Isaac told him, ruffling his hair. Elizabeth took to her role as eldest sister with natural authority, showing a nurturing side that reminded Fiona powerfully of the girl's mother. William was surprisingly gentle with the infants, while Sarah appointed herself official singer of lullabies. Thomas, no longer the baby of the family, seemed to grow taller overnight, determined to be a big brother in truth. As winter deepened, the Sutton household settled into new rhythms. The twins grew stronger each day, their distinct personalities already emerging: James quiet and observant, Joseph active and vocal. On Christmas Eve, with all the children finally asleep and the twins fed, Fiona joined Isaac on the porch. Despite the cold, they wrapped themselves in blankets and sat watching the stars, a tradition they had established. "I have something for you," Isaac said, pulling a small package from his pocket. Fiona unwrapped it to find a locket containing miniature portraits of all 6 children. "Oh, Isaac," she breathed, tears springing to her eyes. "It's perfect. When I sent that advertisement for a housekeeper, I never imagined," he shook his head, words failing him, "that the stranger who stepped off that stagecoach would become your wife and the mother of your children." Fiona finished for him, smiling through her tears. "God works in mysterious ways," Isaac said softly, drawing her close. "Indeed he does," Fiona agreed, thinking of the long journey that had brought her here, to this man, these children, this life built from the ashes of what they had both lost. They sat together in the quiet night, the vast Arkansas sky spread above them like a blessing, their home warm and filled with sleeping children behind them. "Merry Christmas, my love," Isaac whispered, kissing her gently. "Merry Christmas," Fiona replied, knowing that the greatest gift had already been given: the chance to build a new family from broken pieces, to find love where they had least expected it, and to create a future bright with promise. As they rose to go inside, snow began to fall softly, covering the ranch in a blanket of pristine white. Tomorrow would bring the chaos and joy of Christmas with 6 children, but tonight was theirs alone, a moment of peace in which to marvel at the remarkable journey that had brought them together. The fire in the hearth glowed warm as they stepped inside, closing the door on the winter night. In that moment, Fiona knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home at last. 5 years later, the Sutton Ranch had nearly doubled in size, prosperity evident in the fresh paint on the expanded house, and the new barn that stood proudly nearby. The family had grown as well, with the addition of a daughter, Abigail, named after the neighbor who had helped them through difficult times. On a warm summer evening, as the sun cast golden light across the prairie, Fiona stood on the porch watching her children at play. Elizabeth, now 15 and blossoming into a beautiful young woman, supervised the younger ones with natural grace. William, 13 and his father's shadow, had just returned from helping with the cattle. Sarah, 11, was teaching 8-year-old Thomas to play cat's cradle, while the 5-year-old twins chased each other around the yard, their boundless energy a constant source of amusement. Little Abigail, not quite 3, toddled after them, determined to keep up. "Quite a brood we have," Isaac's voice came from behind her as his arms encircled her waist. Fiona leaned back against his chest, smiling. "Indeed, and I wouldn't change a thing." "Nor would I," he agreed, resting his chin on her shoulder. though the house sometimes feels too small for all these growing children. Perhaps we should build another addition, Fiona suggested teasingly. Isaac's chuckle rumbled against her back. Or perhaps the older ones will begin to make their own way soon enough. Henderson at the bank mentioned he'd be interested in taking Elizabeth on as an assistant when she's a bit older. She has a good head for figures. She does, Fiona agreed, feeling a pang at the thought of their eldest leaving, though that day was still some years away. And William will make an excellent rancher. With his own spread someday, no doubt, Isaac said proudly. Their conversation was interrupted by shouts from the yard as the twins' game devolved into a tussle. "James, Joseph, gentle with each other," Fiona called. The boys separated immediately, their expressions so identically contrite that Fiona and Isaac both laughed. "I'll help with supper," Isaac said, pressing a kiss to her temple before releasing her. As they moved inside together, Fiona marveled yet again at how far they had come. The grief-stricken widower she had met that first day had transformed into a man who laughed easily and loved deeply. The lost, uncertain woman she had been was now confident in her place as wife and mother. That night, with all the children finally asleep, Fiona found Isaac sitting at the kitchen table, a letter in his hand. "What is it?" she asked, noting his pensive expression. "A letter from Martha's sister in St. Louis," he said. "She's planning to visit next month." Fiona sat beside him, taking his hand. "That will be wonderful for the children. They haven't seen their aunt in years." Isaac nodded. "She's eager to meet the three youngest whom she knows only through my letters." He hesitated. "And to meet you, of course." Fiona understood his unspoken concern. "I'm looking forward to meeting her as well." "You're not worried, should I be?" Fiona asked gently. Isaac shook his head. "No, Caroline is kind-hearted. She's always supported us, even from a distance." He squeezed her hand. "I just want her to see how happy we are, how good our life is now." "She will," Fiona assured him. How could she not? When Caroline arrived the following month, any lingering concerns were quickly put to rest. Martha's sister, a slender, graying woman with the same gentle eyes that Elizabeth had inherited, embraced Fiona warmly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for bringing life back to my brother-in-law and for loving my nieces and nephews so well." "They make it easy," Fiona replied honestly. During Caroline's visit, there were quiet moments when memories of Martha were shared, stories the older children needed to hear to keep their mother alive in their hearts, and that the younger ones needed to understand their family's history. Fiona encouraged these conversations, secure enough in her place to honor the woman who had come before her. On Caroline's last evening with them, she presented Fiona with a small package. "Martha would want you to have this," she said. Inside was a delicate cameo brooch that had belonged to Martha's grandmother. "I couldn't possibly," Fiona began. "Please," Caroline insisted. "It should stay in this family with the woman who mothers these children." Tears in her eyes, Fiona accepted the gift, understanding it for what it was, a passing of a torch, a blessing from the past upon the present. Later that night, after Caroline had retired to the guest room, Isaac found Fiona on the porch, the brooch pinned to her dress. "It suits you," he said softly. "It's a tremendous honor," Fiona replied, "to be entrusted with something so meaningful." Isaac took her hands in his. "You've been entrusted with far more precious things than a brooch, my love, and you've proven worthy of that trust every day." As they stood together under the vast Arkansas sky, Fiona reflected on the long, unlikely journey that had brought her to this place. From the frightened, heartbroken woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Fort Smith to the confident wife and mother she now was, the transformation seemed almost miraculous. Yet it had happened one small step at a time through daily acts of love, through persistence in the face of grief, through the courage to build something new from broken pieces. "What are you thinking?" Isaac asked, noting her contemplative expression. "That life takes unexpected turns," she said. "And sometimes those turns lead us exactly where we need to be." Isaac nodded, drawing her close. "I couldn't agree more." As autumn painted the prairie in gold and crimson, the Sutton family celebrated 10 years since Fiona had first arrived at the ranch. The occasion called for a special gathering, with neighbors and friends joining them for a harvest feast. Elizabeth, now 20, and engaged to the son of a neighboring rancher, helped Fiona prepare for days. William, 18 and increasingly taking on responsibilities at the ranch, constructed extra tables for the guests. The younger children were assigned various tasks according to their abilities, all eager to contribute to the celebration. As Fiona observed her family working together, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey hadn't always been easy. There had been droughts that threatened the ranch, illnesses that had frightened them all, and the normal challenges of raising 7 children with distinct personalities and needs. Yet through it all, the love between her and Isaac had only deepened, providing a solid foundation for their family. The children had grown strong and kind, each developing their own character while maintaining the tight bonds of siblinghood that united them. "Penny for your thoughts," Isaac said, coming to stand beside her as she checked on pies cooling on the windowsill. "I was just thinking how blessed we are," Fiona replied. "Look at what we've built together, Isaac." He followed her gaze to their bustling household, Elizabeth showing Sarah a new stitch for the table runners, William and Thomas bringing in firewood, the twins helping little Abigail set the tables, each plate carefully placed under their sister's earnest direction. "We've been blessed indeed," Isaac agreed, his arm sliding around her waist. "And it all began when a brave, beautiful woman stepped off a stagecoach and into our lives." The celebration that evening was everything Fiona could have hoped for. Neighbors who had initially been skeptical of the outsider now embraced her as an integral part of their community. The children moved confidently among the guests, a testament to the security and love they had known in their home. As twilight fell, Isaac called for everyone's attention, raising his glass in a toast. 10 years ago, our family was broken," he said, his voice carrying across the gathering. "I was a shadow of a man, and my children were growing up without the mothering they deserved." He turned to Fiona, his eyes warm with love. "Then this extraordinary woman answered an advertisement for a housekeeper and became so much more a loving wife to me, a devoted mother to our children, the heart of our home." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "To Fiona," Isaac concluded, "who taught us all how to live and love again." "To Fiona," the guests echoed, raising their glasses with tears in her eyes. Fiona looked around at the family and community that had become hers. From Elizabeth, who would soon begin her own family but would always be the daughter of her heart, to little Abigail, who had never known any mother but Fiona, each of these children had claimed a piece of her soul. And Isaac, the man who had once been so broken by grief that he could barely speak her name, now stood tall and strong beside her, his love a constant that had sustained them through every trial. As the evening progressed, with music and dancing under the stars, Fiona found herself momentarily alone, watching her family from a slight distance. Elizabeth was dancing with her fiancé, their faces alight with young love. William was deep in conversation with a neighboring rancher, his demeanor increasingly that of a man rather than a boy. Sarah twirled with Thomas in an improvised dance that had them both laughing. The twins were engaged in some good-natured competition involving horseshoes, while Abigail had fallen asleep on a bench, her small face peaceful in slumber. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Sutton?" Isaac's voice came from behind her. Fiona turned to find him offering his hand, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes that now held joy more often than sorrow. "I would be delighted, Mr. Sutton," she replied, taking his hand. As they moved together to the fiddle's melody, the years seemed to fall away. Fiona remembered their first awkward conversations, the gradual thawing of Isaac's grief-frozen heart, the moment she had first realized she was falling in love with him. "What a journey we've had," she said softly. "And many miles yet to travel together," Isaac replied, drawing her closer. As the music ended, they remained in each other's arms for a moment longer. Around them, their family and community continued the celebration, but in that brief interlude, it was just the two of them, a man and woman who had found each other against all odds and built a life neither could have imagined. "Thank you," Isaac whispered against her hair. "For what?" "For answering that advertisement, for taking a chance on a broken man and his motherless children, for becoming the heart of our home." Fiona looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "It was the best decision I ever made." Above them, stars scattered across the Arkansas sky like diamonds on black velvet. The same stars, Fiona thought, that had witnessed their beginning, a wary widower and a hopeful stranger, taking the first tentative steps toward healing, toward family, toward love. What had once seemed an ending, Martha's death, Fiona's broken engagement had proven instead to be a beginning. A reminder that even in the depths of loss, new life can take root and flourish. As they walked hand in hand back to their celebrating family, Fiona Sutton carried this truth in her heart. Sometimes, the greatest journeys begin with a simple step off a stagecoach into the unknown. And sometimes, a stranger can become the missing piece that makes a family whole again.